The wrong door. The Allied soldier who walked into German headquarters and walked back out. A note before we begin. Some details of this story come from accounts that were retold, passed between units, and reconstructed over time. The core of what happened is documented in military records. The texture of it is as close to the truth as careful research allows. This is one of those stories the war produced in abundance, and the official histories barely mention, which is exactly why it deserves to be told. Autumn 1944, somewhere near the Belgian border. His name was Thomas, a corporal in an Allied infantry unit pushing eastward through a partially cleared Belgian town. 22 years old, originally from a small town in the American Midwest, the kind of place where the war had arrived first as a headline, and then as a draft notice, and then as a troop ship crossing an ocean. He had been in Europe for 7 months by the time this happened, long enough to have learned the particular economy of movement that combat teaches, long enough to have stopped flinching at artillery he judged to be more than half a mile away, long enough to have become a different person than the one who had left home. He was the kind of soldier who did not draw attention to himself, which, in his experience, was the kind of soldier who survived. He had learned to be useful without being visible, to do what needed doing without requiring anyone to notice that he was doing it. He had a particular skill for reading situations quickly, for understanding before anyone spoke what a room required of him. He did not know, on the morning this happened, that this skill was about to be tested in a way that had no parallel in anything he had experienced before. He was about to need every month of it. The door. The street looked right. He had checked the map twice. He had been moving through a sector swept by Allied forces earlier that morning, trying to link up with a forward element that had pushed ahead faster than expected. The town was mostly quiet, a few civilians moving cautiously between buildings, heads down, smoke from somewhere to the north. The kind of morning that felt almost ordinary, which after 7 months of this, Thomas knew was the kind of morning that deserved the most suspicion. He turned onto a narrow street lined with stone buildings, facades pocked with the marks of recent fighting, and found the building that matched his description. A 3-story structure on the corner with a green door and a number he had written on his hand that morning. He tried the handle. Unlocked. He pushed the door open and stepped inside before his eyes had time to adjust to the light. And then he saw them. 8 German officers, some seated around a long table covered in maps, a half-eaten meal pushed to one side, others standing near a radio. Set in the corner, cups of coffee going cold beside them, a telephone on the wall, papers pinned in rows above a secondary table near the window, the evidence of a working command post, fully occupied and fully operational, every single one of them now looking directly at him. The room went completely silent. Not the gradual silence of conversation trailing off, the sudden total silence of a record being lifted mid-song. One moment there was noise, the murmur of men at work, the crackle of the radio, the scratch of a pencil on paper. The next moment, there was nothing except the distant artillery to the east and the sound of Thomas's own breathing, and 8 men in German uniform deciding what they were looking at. His stomach dropped through the floor. He had walked into a German command post. The ground that swallowed men. This kind of thing happened more often than the official histories suggest. The front line, as it appeared on headquarters maps, was a clean stroke across France and Belgium. two armies with a notional separation between them. Objectives circled in grease pencil. It looked from a sufficient distance like something that could be comprehended. On the ground, it was nothing like that. Villages changed hands 3 times in a single afternoon. Roads marked as cleared at dawn had German vehicles on them by noon. Orders written for a situation that existed at 6 in the morning were being executed against a situation that had completely changed by 10. Units moved faster than communications could track them, and a soldier following a route memorized from a briefing 2 hours earlier could round a corner and find himself somewhere that briefing had never imagined. Thomas had done everything right. He had the correct building number, the correct street. The information he had been given was simply no longer accurate by the time he tried to use it. The building he needed was 3 streets over. The building in front of him, identical from the outside, had been occupied by a German signals unit for the past 4 days. Was the signal that would turn a look into a command, and a command into the end of everything. His hand found the door handle. The metal was cold. He noticed that with the strange precision the mind achieves when it understands that each individual second is the one that matters most. He pushed. A corridor. A window at the far end showed gray autumn sky. Below it, a street. No German uniforms. No movement. He stepped through and let the door close behind him. The click of the latch was the smallest sound he had ever heard, and the most complete. The walk. He walked the corridor the way he had crossed the room, not quickly, not slowly, at the pace of a destination. His legs felt strange beneath him, functional but disconnected, running on a separate circuit from the part of him still standing in that doorway, still waiting for the shout. The sweat on his back had gone cold. He could feel his heartbeat in his hands. An enlisted man came the other way, carrying a wooden crate of documents, head down, watching the uneven floor. Thomas moved to one side. The man moved to the other. They passed each other in the corridor of a German command post in a Belgian border town in the autumn of 1944, without making eye contact, the way 2 people pass in a hallway when both have somewhere to be. A door to his right opened. An officer stepped out, glancing at a document in his hand, still reading as he moved. He looked up. His eyes passed over Thomas with the brief, uninterested sweep of a man whose attention is already somewhere else. He turned in the opposite direction and walked away down the corridor, boots loud on the floor, the sound fading as the distance between them grew. Thomas did not let his shoulders drop. Not yet. Not until he was out. The front door was visible ahead. 20 feet. 15. 10. Thomas pushed it open and stepped out. The door swung closed behind him. A small, mechanical, final sound. The sound of a latch catching. The sound of a chapter ending. The street was gray and cold. Cobblestones slick from earlier rain. Smoke to the east. Black against a white sky. He turned left. He walked. He did not look back. He had spent 4 minutes being a man who had nothing to look back at, and he kept that identity on his face and in his walk for the length of the street and around the corner. He made it half a block before his hands started shaking. Not trembling, shaking, with the specific, uncontrolled quality of a body releasing 7 months of training and 4 minutes of the most demanding performance of his life all at once, through his hands, because his hands were the only thing he had let go. He kept walking. 40 minutes. He reached Allied lines approximately 40 minutes later, linking up with the forward element near a crossroads from the morning briefing. The after-action documentation is a careful document. It notes the circumstances of his separation, records his return, and acknowledges in language both precise and evasive that he moved through a building occupied by German personnel and exited without being apprehended. What it does not record is the cost, what those 4 minutes actually required. The sustained, exhausting effort of controlling every signal his body was producing while every system in him ran on pure terror. The weight of holding a direct look from a trained German officer and returning it with the expression of a man who had every right to be exactly where he was. The men in his unit, when he told them what had happened, did not have a category for it either. Some of them laughed in the way that soldiers laugh at things that are not funny. Some of them went quiet for a moment before changing the subject. The story got passed along, the way those stories did, and grew slightly different in each retelling, the way those stories also did. He was not exceptional in any way the Army measured. He was a 22-year-old corporal who had spent 7 months learning to function under conditions that should not have been survivable on a daily basis. What he had was what those months had built in him. Something that did not have a name in any official document, but that got him across that room, down that corridor, and out that door. It was not bravery in the way the word usually gets used. It was the refusal, made somewhere below language, to accept the room as the end of the story. The knowledge that the street was still out there, that the left turn was still available, that there was still something worth walking toward. His hands stopped shaking around the second block. He never went back to that street. He already knew what it had decided about him. And in the 40 minutes it took to walk back to the lines, with the artillery still going, and the cold Belgian sky pressing down, and the smoke still rising to the east, that knowledge was enough. It was, for that morning, everything. He had approximately 2 seconds to figure out what to do about that. The performance. He did not reach for his weapon. Reaching for his weapon in a room with 8 armed German officers would have ended the story inside that room. There was no version of that action that concluded with him walking out of the building. He did not freeze. Freezing was a confession. Freezing said in a language requiring no translation. I have just realized something is catastrophically wrong. And a man who had realized that in a German command post was a man whose future could be measured in seconds. He moved, not quickly. Panic in a man wearing the wrong uniform would have cut through every ambiguity in that space, not slowly. Slow would have invited the sustained scrutiny he could not survive. He moved at the pace of a man who had somewhere to be, and found this particular room mildly inconvenient. He could feel his pulse in his throat, the specific, rapid, insistent pulse of a body that has classified the situation as terminal and is trying to do something about it. His hands wanted to shake, and he would not let them. His lungs wanted to pull in a sharp, audible breath, and he kept them even and quiet. The muscles in his legs wanted to carry him backward through the door he had just come through, and he denied them that completely. Every nerve in his body was screaming in one direction, and he used every one of those nerves to go in the other, channeling the energy of pure fear into the governance of his face, his pace, the set of his shoulders, the angle of his chin, the direction of his eyes. He adjusted the strap of his weapon, not to ready it, just adjusted it. the slightly irritated, completely unconscious gesture of a man whose equipment is chafing him on the way to somewhere he needs to be. It is a gesture so universal, so embedded in the physical language of every soldier who has ever carried something heavy, that it reads across any language, any uniform, as someone who belongs. His eyes moved across the room the way eyes move across furniture. Not examining, not avoiding, just passing through. There was a door on the far side. He had no idea where it led. It could have been a wall, a closet, another room full of officers. None of that mattered. The door led away from here, and away from here was the only direction in the building that had any value left in it. He walked toward it. 8 men. The officer nearest the entrance, the one whose mouth had been open mid-sentence when Thomas walked in, closed it. His eyes tracked the movement across the room. He did not speak. The radio operator turned back to his equipment. The man at the head of the table, the oldest in the room, with the controlled stillness of someone who has learned to make decisions quickly, without showing the speed of the process, had not moved. He was watching with the focused attention of a man gathering information before committing to a response. When the human brain encounters something unexpected, it does not reach immediately for the most alarming explanation. It reaches for the most plausible one. In a military headquarters, a uniformed man moving purposefully through the room usually means a uniformed man with a reason to be there. And in the time it took that explanation to be tested against the details that did not quite fit, Thomas was crossing the room. He was halfway across now. His footsteps on the wooden floor were the only sound. Each one felt like it should be louder than it was, like his boots should be broadcasting something he needed to keep contained. He could hear the radio in the corner, a low-frequency hiss between transmissions. He could hear someone at the table exhale. He could hear very clearly his own pulse, and he focused on keeping it from showing in his face. His back was a wall of cold tension, every muscle between his shoulder blades braced against the shout that had not come yet. The sweat there had gone cold in the time since he had walked in. The senior officer's expression shifted. Something moved behind his eyes, some acceleration in the process of recognition. The gap between the plausible explanation and the true one was narrowing. He looked up. Thomas looked back, not away, directly back, with the mild, faintly impatient expression of a man who has been interrupted and cannot understand why. The look that says, "I see you looking at me, and I cannot account for it, because there is nothing about my presence here that requires your attention." The officer's gaze moved on. This happened 3 times before Thomas reached the far door. 3 times a German officer's eyes found him and held long enough for the question to form. 3 times Thomas met the look and let it pass through him like light through glass, because the alternative, the flicker, the fractional break in eye contact, the slight quickening of pace that frightened people produce without knowing it,